Mirror, mirror on the wall. Is this movie worth watching? Like, at all?
I'm sorry, my dear.
What's up, guys? We just saw Disney's Snow White.
I'm a big Disney fan personally, but I actually really want to know what you thought about it.
Well, I went into this movie with, it's probably like the blankest slate I've ever walked into a movie with because I had zero expectations. I actually was expecting this to be a horrendous B movie, like something that I could really enjoy laughing at.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping, was that it would be so bad it's good territory.
I mean, you listen to people talk about this film and it's like the second coming of the apocalypse or something, and the first one hasn't even come yet. But it's weird. I watched it and I'm like, hey, this is actually a pretty enjoyable family movie.
Which I'm like so glad to hear you say that, because I similarly went in with pretty low expectations, just because I feel like a lot of the remakes have been disappointing and didn't feel justified in their existence. This one I would say exceeded my expectations. It's certainly not perfect, but
No.
I think on the whole, I'm way more positive on it than I expected.
There's definitely huge glaring flaws in the film, but I will say that I found myself being impressed way more than I was disappointed. And that is in large part to Rachel Zegler. And this is just a canvas for her abilities.
It's honestly crazy because I think she's someone who has a tremendous amount of talent, and she came onto the scenes blazing in West Side Story. And in the meantime, I think has had a bit spottier of a filmography looking at Shazam.
Just glaring at you, Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods.
And again, while this isn't necessarily the most elevated film she could have done, she elevates the material herself. And like you said, it showcases her acting chops, her vocal chops beyond anything else. And she really makes this a very endearing Snow White for us to follow.
She's so impressive because Snow White as a story is really very campy and it's very of the time. So they adapt a lot of that in this movie and they keep it really painstakingly faithful at points.
Yes.
And the material from back then could be really cringy or could be really awkward. But Rachel has this sweet sincerity. She almost glides across the camera. She's just so wonderful that when she's delivering these lines as Snow White, all you can really see is this impassioned, very like sweet and loving performance that she's giving. And I just found myself going, wow, she's pretty wonderful.
She's absolutely wonderful. And from what you told me, you're not at all that familiar with the original film, or at least not as much as I am.
I had seen it a couple of times when I was a kid, and I walked into this and walking out, I was like, maybe I don't know what Snow White was about. Maybe I don't remember it as well as I thought I did.
But I can honestly say, at least just in my opinion, that there are times I really feel like she just became Snow White.
Yeah.
Where we know her very well as Rachel Zegler, as Maria, as all these other roles, but I actually could see her just kind of disappear into this role at times. And I think that's such a testament to her.
Yes, and I do think the movie stays very true to the character of Snow White. For all of the backlash and criticisms that people gave to her in this movie, I think they do a really good job of doubling down on what the whole theme of Snow White is, and that's being kind and being fair and being an empowered young woman. And I think that's what I really loved about the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, let's also be honest. The original movie was very short. There
Yes.
wasn't that much that she really did, and I'm not even saying that necessarily as a criticism. She just objectively didn't do much, and there wasn't as many layers to her as there are in this film.
Yes.
And I think there are changes that they do make that do service the character very effectively, that don't feel necessarily like a betrayal to the original character.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest changes that I found myself really enjoying was no more Prince. We have now Jonathan.
Oh my god.
I love this new thing that we're doing in a lot of like princess themed rom-coms or just like princess themed stories where the prince is not this very boring and generic like goody two-shoes perfect man. Jonathan has flaws. Who's played by Andrew Burnap, who's pretty new on the movie scene.
Which I think you're right about. I know he's done a pretty fair amount of Broadway at this point, but I have never seen him personally myself.
Yeah, and I know this is not the right IP, but I found myself really charmed by this not Prince. And I really love what he did with this character of Jonathan and how that not only plays off of Zegler's Snow White, but also informs her arc as a character as well.
Yeah, because I think for anyone who's really concerned about if they're making too many changes, if they completely remove romance from the story, trust me, that is not the case with this at all. And I think it's an enhanced romantic subplot more than anything else that really plays well into the changes they made with the story and with these versions of the character.
Yes, and I mean, in a story that culminates in true love's kiss, you have to have true love there. And I think, like you said, the movie does a really good job of making the romance feel earned and making that moment itself feel earned. And I really love what Mark Webb did in that moment, too. I think overall, this is a really stylized film. And I love what Webb did with the camera a lot of the times. There's some really sweeping, beautiful cinematography in this film. And some shots that I really found myself going, damn, that's pretty cool.
Oh, I completely agree. I think visually the set design is really breathtaking at times. And what I also really love is the way they do the animals. They're animated in such a way that obviously they're CGI, but they fit the aesthetic very well. They don't feel jarring or uncanny. And I mean, that's a huge aspect of Snow White as a character are the woodland animals. And I think they're used so well. And they honestly offer some of the funniest moments in the movie.
Disney has had a huge problem in these live action movies with animals. They either go way too realistic or they go even more realistic. And it just, animals inherently don't make these cute animated faces in real life that they do in these movies. And when you make an animal hyper realistic, you can't get the same emotionality out of them that they would have in their animated counterpart. So in this movie, they make them realistic, but they give them exaggerated facial features, which I think really enhances the magical aspect of this world, because this is a world full of magic, especially in Snow White.
Absolutely, because what they do well is they fit within the scene and they work well with the actual real human characters.
Yes.
But again, they don't look uncannily realistic.
But with the good, you have to get to the bad, and there's a glaring issue in this movie that can't be ignored, and that's, unfortunately, Gal Gadot, who is horrendously miscast as the evil queen.
Oh, I completely agree. Whenever you would switch back and forth between the scenes with Rachel and then the scenes with Gal, they really felt just like two totally separate movies, and they just were never on the same page.
Yeah, it's so weird, because I feel like she was trying to get to the same movie that everyone else was in.
Yes.
But she was playing it completely wrong. I feel like Webb was giving her the proper direction.
Yeah.
But she was trying to be this mustache-twirling, over-the-top villain, and a lot of the times, she just couldn't live up to the material that was in front of her.
She never lived up to it because she never went far enough. But I don't know if she was ever capable of doing so. And one other thing we didn't even touch on yet related to her performance is there's a lot of original songs in this movie that are really strong. But the song that they write for the evil queen is so grating because she just doesn't have the gravitas for it.
And it not only is it, I wouldn't say it's great. Like, it doesn't like bother me, but it's so bad when you sandwich it in between songs that are sung by people who are actual classically trained singers. And it doesn't help her in any way, shape, or form. It's a very weird moment in the movie, accompanied by, again, her doing some very weird things. She's at a point where she's trying to play over the top, but she's not going over the top enough. So it's grounded with like flailing movement shovels. At times she looks like one of those like wacky waving inflatable tube mans. And it's just not, I'm like, I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to be mean, but it's very jarring in a movie where everyone else is really on point.
I was going to say acting circles around her.
Yeah, and it's just, you have to wonder just like, why?
There's a lot of questions of why. And pivoting away from that, I actually want to touch on some other notable Snow White characters, mainly the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah, there was a lot of controversy surrounding this film when it came to those 7 specific characters. And I know that it sparked debate online, and they pivoted away from them at one point, and they cast like 7 bandits. And then they were like, then the internet found out, and the internet freaked out about that too. So then they went back to the original Dwarves version of the film. And what we're left with in this movie is kind of an amalgamation of both of those ideas that I think is fine for the most part. But it's very clear that they shot major part of this movie without having those characters in it. So when they, like in some scenes, they're just kind of there in the background. And even though we're led to believe that they would be doing something in that scene, it kind of builds up to them just being there.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, if they were going to have the Seven Dwarfs to begin with, they should have just cast 7 actors who are little people in the roles to begin with. That's just what they should have done. What they do in the movie with the CGI characters, I will say I do think the vocal performances are very strong.
Yes.
They got some of the biggest laughs out of us in the movie. I think they're very talented. I loved their rendition of Hi-Ho. That being said, the CGI would be pretty good if this were a fully CGI film. Within this film, it looks and feels just way too uncanny a lot of the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's very clear that there were additions that were added in that maybe didn't have the time to be polished as much as the animals were.
Yeah.
Because the animals look fantastic, but the humans take a large time because you don't want to have that uncanny valley effect, and a lot of the times they do have that effect in this movie, and that's because, again, they were an afterthought. There was a lot of remodeling done. But with that being said, on a scale of 1 to 5 apples, Nikki, what did you think of Disney's Snow White?
Like I said, it honestly exceeded my expectations, which weren't high to begin with. It does have some very glaring flaws, but I had a more enjoyable time than I thought, so I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 apples.
That's nice. That's really lovely. I actually went into this with 0 expectations, came out enjoying it a nice amount. I fairly enjoyed it. I think this is going to be a really great movie for families, a really great movie for young girls, a movie that kids can go to and their parents can take them to and really have fun with. I'm also going to be giving this 3 out of 5 apples. Snow White drops in theaters March 21st. Go check it out for yourself. If you guys liked the video, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest content. If you want to check out our other reviews, click the link on the page. Until next time, guys, stay versed.